It is the beginning of another academic year, and a fresh set of foreign students is preparing to embark on an academic adventure abroad. But with so many changes in immigration rules for foreign students and a high cost of studying in the UK, we ask, is it time for students from developing countries to stop craving Western education? Do developing countries crave Western education and marginalize theirs?
One of the factors that, in my own opinion, will be responsible for people actually craving for Western education is the fact that the level of educational development back home in these countries are not as developed as it is, in the foreign countries. And, everyone on the surface of the earth has the right to go to any part where he feels that his potentials were maximized. So people actually want to take their career to the next level. They want to study in an institution that has all the facilities that will be available for research, network with people all over the world, because the world is boundaries are increasingly being constricted. We live in a global society whereby something happening in a particular part of the world actually has an effect on another part of the world. So I think these are one of the reasons, these are the reasons why students from developing countries will actually want to crave Western education.
Don't you think that the influence Western education has on developing countries has to do with the basis of the economics, not really the knowledge? Because just like Wimini said, there are so many great professors in Ghana, in Nigeria, in Benin, even South Africa.
Yes.
But why people still want to come here?
I'll start with giving it a historical perspective. You know, when the colonialists were in Ghana, or in Africa for that matter, in Ghana, then the Gold Coast, for example, the bright students were picked up by the colonialists and the missionaries to come over here in the United Kingdom to study. And I remember very well Philip Kweku, who was one of the first students to come from Ghana to the UK to study, Dr. Kweji Agri. And when all those people went back, it gave a very high impression to a lot of families around there who wanted their children also to come overseas to come and study. And in those days, they would study and go back. And anybody who was a European graduate or a UK graduate at that time stood very tall in the community at the time. That is the historical perspective. But coming to modern day, I think the reason why most people all want to come and most students want to come and study in England is because of the falling standards of the universities that we have in our African countries and the third world countries. For example, the University of Ghana was founded in 1948. Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, the first president of Ghana, was very instrumental in getting the University of London to set up that as University of Ghana, which was an affiliate of University of London at the time. Standards were very high. Most of the lecturers were from the United Kingdom, and the academic standards were just perfect. So nobody would want to crave to come to this place to come and study, because the same stuff that you will have in London was being given there by most of the expatriate lecturers. But of late, the infrastructure in the universities are really not up to standard. You go in there, there are no books, no facilities like a doctor has said, and most of the students are very frustrated. Some of the parents who are able, who have the financial muscle, pay for their students to come over here to study. And when they come here, they have the facilities. I lecture here.
But Lawrence, like the in thing in Nigeria is private education, private universities all over the place.
Yes.
They have all the facilities that we have here, and even South African universities, they're doing very well. But don't you think it's economic when people still insist they want to come to the Western world? Maybe because employers would rather hire somebody from London Metropolitan University than hiring somebody from a private university in Nigeria or maybe a federal university in Ghana.
Do you know something, Akin? Once in a year, the London Times, the newspaper Times, lists a list of universities in what order? How do you call it? In order of merit. And you have Oxford, Cambridge, and all the rest coming down. Who would not want to go to Oxford to study? Who would not want to go to Cambridge to study? The prestige that comes with studying from those universities is so high.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm driving at.
So
Could it be the prestige that people are driving at? Not really
absolutely, the prestige is there. But having said that, not a lot of students have from African background have the opportunity to go to these universities like Cambridge and Oxford. But the other ones like University of Hull, University of any other, Southampton, or they all have equally, in my opinion, equally very high standards. Any university in the United Kingdom, I can say that has quite an appreciable level of standard in terms of the quality of education that they deliver. Some of the private universities that we have in our African countries, I'm afraid to say, their standard is not too good.
Becky, looking at prestige, and a lot of families seeing this as a lifeline because their children will get back to Africa and like they get good jobs because they're coming from a UK university. Don't you think it's about time we change that to make sure that even African universities can produce very good students and there's still that prestige like we used to have for so many universities in Africa way back?
Yeah, we do, but what I think the employers as well, they demand new skills, they demand better skills, better, if you go, if let's say you're coming from UK, you are, you've got more skills than a person who's in Africa. So an employer, if I'm an employer, I will go for the person who's coming from UK because I want to stay at the ladder of the, the business. Everybody wants their business to improve. So if I get somebody who's educated outside, of course I'll go for that person. But yeah, we do have good universities in our countries. But let's face the facts, social status as well. Our name, especially like Nigerians, if you watch movies, oh, I went to school, in England. They'll get that person for a job and you'll be standing holding piles of CVs. So if you get opportunity to come down here, definitely I'll jump for it. Yeah,
but are you not going to encourage the development of the education sector, especially the universities?
We are doing that. Even if you do that, if somebody has the opportunity to come down here and go back again home and make a difference, why can't we do it?
But let me get to Lawrence. Yes. All the money, the UK government makes a lot of money from foreign students.
Yes.
But that money, if we invest it back in African education, especially the universities, don't you think we'll get back to the days of Fouribay College and University of Ghana and University of Ibadan, University of Lagos, where we had good universities then?
Very good, absolutely, I agree with you. Fouribay College, Sierra Leone was an excellent university. Unfortunately, when you read in the newspapers these days, there are falling standards in that university there too, and people from students from Sierra Leone are all coming to the United Kingdom to study. But let me just add to what my friend, my lady had just said. Most employers around the world, they are influenced by the type or the university where you got your degree from. For example, if you go back to Nigeria or you go to Ghana and say, oh, I've got my degree from Oxford, on your CV, you are picked ahead of everybody, particularly if you go to any of the international employers. But if you say you went to a university in the Gambia, for example, probably they haven't even heard of that university before. And I can tell you that some of the university, their names are synonymous with quality.
But don't you think that one of the issues about that is that because those institutions were quite elitist, and if you like, the Africans that have kind of come abroad historically, maybe they've done things like law, and maybe they've kind of fed a whole attitude of consumption. So when they go back to Africa, they're interested in consumption, buying goods from Europe back into Africa, rather than thinking about Africa's developmental needs. It's one thing to go abroad and study and go back home and to then enable the country to develop. But I suppose if you go abroad and you just pick up Western ideas, you can only work with the Western infrastructure.
If you pick up Western ideas, Western education here, does it apply to what happens on ground on the continent of Africa? And again, I was about asking, the idea of putting so much prestige into the UK education system. Well, what do you think government could do to make sure that big universities in Africa could get back to the old ways that they were?
I think I'll go back to the point you made that money, government can reinvest the money in the universities and provide the equipment that the students need in order to go back to the standard that we used to have. But unfortunately, that is not happening. You go to a university in Africa now, and there are about 300 students in one class. How on earth can they imbibe what is being taught? You know, the quality definitely will not going to be at that level. So I think we need to do a little bit more, you know, to inject a lot of infrastructure, equipment, facilities into our university, and also try to encourage our own doctors, African doctors who have graduated here to come back home, to come and help. For example, the University of Ghana has a very wonderful program by which it has linked with Ghanaian lecturers in the diaspora. Once a while, 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 of us go to a particular university, do about 2 or 3 or 4 weeks there, you know, lecture there, and then come back. You know, that is one way in which we can get the way forward of inculcating whatever standard that we have lost.
Okay, let me get
Yes,
to Dr. Ogbemini. You are a well-trained medical doctor, trained in Nigeria.
Yeah.
But like, just like Beke was saying, a lot of employers want people from the University of Oxford, Hull, or whatever here in the UK. Why did you think of going to South Africa? Because I heard the University of Stellenbosch in South Africa has a wonderful postgraduate course for medical school.
University of Stellenbosch
Yeah.
actually has the best business school in Africa.
Yeah.
That the second is actually the Lagos Business School, which I did a certificate in media enterprise then, like the School of Media and Communication. For me, the reason why I actually studied in Imperial College, I'm actually at the business school studying health management, is that, like I said earlier, it's about thinking globally and acting locally. Prior to leaving for Nigeria, I had it at the back of my mind that I'm not staying back in the UK. I'm actually taking the knowledge I've gained from here, you know, back to Nigeria.
But is it just about the knowledge or employability when you get back home?
Yes. Now, there are different motives for doing things, and like I said, for me it's about, you know, looking at the void that has to be filled in the healthcare sector back home, especially that Nigeria has the National Health Insurance Scheme, you know, that she's trying to implement, and coverage is very low. So for me, it's seeing the void and the dearth of skilled healthcare management manpower. So fine, if you look at it from the employability side, Doctor is very right that most employers of labor will actually consider the people coming from the foreign countries with foreign degrees, but you can't blame them because these people are actually exposed to better ways of teaching. They're actually exposed to modern methods of teaching, and that was what I said in the first instance, that African countries and developing countries in general actually have to put more resources into their education. Now, in 1990, there was a World Conference for Education, which adopted the World Declaration on Education for All. And in 2009, there was a global monitoring report. And incidentally, he's also focusing on marginalization of education, trying to look at the areas whereby, trying to look at inequalities in access to education on the parts of status, on socioeconomic status, on race and all that, and trying to proffer solutions, you know, whereby people that actually have the capacity, you know, for education are actually given this. So I think there has to be a concerted efforts, you know, not just for African countries, but for countries that have some inequality in education to be able to like fill this void and make sure that, their citizens have better education, because you cannot...
Can I just pick up on something there?
Yeah, go.
Is it, because you mentioned it, is it better or is it just different in that maybe that's part of the issue, that again, that we're lauding certain notions of education, just assuming intrinsically that Western education is better rather than it being different. And actually, is Western education, the Western education that's given to graduates of African descent, is it really benefiting us? Long term, as
is it relevant to the needs of Africa?
Because actually, I must quickly say something. My producer was even whispering to me here that look, like even if you acquire the education here, you go back home, you're still going to face the same infrastructure.
That's right. I would like to say something about that. Looking at the historical perspective of Western education, now you had the hunter-gathering societies as far back as 10 million years ago. And this was as a result of the fact that then it was more of surviving the harsh environment that the Europeans or the Western world, you know, I mean, are actually exposed to. I mean, you have extremes of weather and all that. And these now metamorphosed into a situation whereby, of course, then it was basically surviving the day, of course, getting food to eat, or warming up and all that. And now, gradually, this evolved into mechanized forms of farming, whereby new methods are passed on to succeeding generation. And basically, I mean, what I'm trying to say in essence is that that is like the genesis of Western education.
Okay, let me quickly get to William, because we have to take a break soon. They're talking about the increment in fees. Even the home students are shouting they can't pay. And won't it deter people from coming here from Africa to the UK? Another thing is that the fee is too high, and people are beginning to say, we don't want to go to the UK again, we're going to Canada, we're going to the US. Don't you think it's about time, maybe this is the time to change things back home and make sure that maybe Ghanaians, Beninoas, Congolese, Zimbabweans will think that, okay, yeah, they have better universities at home with this money we're paying. Don't you think it's a good thing for Africans?
Eventually, it may be a good thing. Maybe it's easy for me as a Western-educated African to sit here and say, yeah, Africans should stay home and be educated there. But yes, obviously, for longer term, the more educated, skilled people being educated on the continent, having the values within inside the continent, certainly that will benefit the continent.